Hey friends, welcome back to Movies in a Bottle, where we're breaking down Spy Kids. Shameless plug, I chose this movie because I wanted to show my friend slash co-host of the Generation Video podcast the first Robert Rodriguez movie that I ever watched after he showed me Rodriguez's directorial debut, El Mariachi. So here we are. The links will be in the description for anybody curious. Also, y'all seem to enjoy whenever I go back and cover nostalgic family movies, so I was pretty thorough in the script. You're welcome. Lastly, I'm starting the trivia early this round because, did you know? The kid in Rodriguez's production company, Troublemaker Studios, is supposed to represent a younger version of him, and that his name is Pepino, which translates to cucumber. Well, now you know, and now we can roll film. I'm kicking this one off with a disclaimer. I got a D in Spanish, so I apologize for any butchering of the pronunciations. But today's thrilling adventure begins during the Monday nighttime routine for the unassuming Cortez family. Quickly rounding them up, we have the parents, Ingrid and Gregorio, along with their daughter, Carmen, and their son, Junie. Junie applies some sort of wart medicine to his bandaged hands, while Carmen asks their mom to tell them the bedtime story about the spies who fell in love. With Carmen's help here and there, Ingrid would reluctantly regale her kids with the following story about characters that look suspiciously like herself and her husband Gregorio. The beautiful spy lady was assigned to take out the dashing gentleman spy, and to do so, she not only utilizes her disguise expertise, but state-of-the-art gadgetry like tracking chewing gum. However, when she closed in on the spy to complete her assignment, the gentleman spy was waiting for her, and he revealed he was similarly assigned to take her out. He was charming, but more importantly, the way he had honorably carried himself during their exchange made the lady realize that years of living detached from her emotions as a spy had done real damage to her, and she needed a change. That change came in the form of a secret Romeo and Juliet type relationship with the rival spy, until eventually, they grew close enough to embark on their most dangerous mission yet: marriage. And even as highly trained as the beautiful spy was, she was terrified of getting married. But all that changed on our wedding day when she saw how confident and dashing her soon-to-be husband was, so she eagerly said, "I do." But since they were each super spies with their own complicated pasts, they were attacked by freaking helicopters before they could even finish their ceremony. As the bride and groom escape with their matching heart-shaped parachutes, they are declared husband and wife, and they passionately kiss each other while they sail away in their boat that reads, "Just married." A good spy always thinks ahead. Then Ingrid quickly wraps up the story explaining the spies retired, had a few kids, and they were all better off. Carmen flatly comments that the story needs more of a happy ever after ending, while Junie thinks it needs more monsters, and I agree with Junie. When Ingrid returns to her husband in the other room, she tells him tonight's bedtime story was their story, even though the kids don't know that yet. But Gregorio reminds his wife that they're just consultants now, before he hits a button and reveals all kinds of cool incognito spy tech. Quick fun fact, Carla Gugino almost didn't accept the role of Ingrid because she felt like she was too young, but Robert Rodriguez convinced her by letting her know that his own mother had him and many of his siblings by the time she was Gugino's age. Gregorio Cortez was a real-life Wild West folk hero, or outlaw, depending on how you see his story, but either way, it's a tragic tale that happened due to a simple linguistic misunderstanding. I'm summarizing, of course, but according to Wikipedia, way back in June of 1901, near the Mexican-American border, a sheriff had suspected Gregorio of horse theft, so he went with an interpreter to ask Gregorio's brother, Romaldo, if he had sold Gregorio a horse, to which his brother replied, "No, I sold him a mare." Tragically, that misunderstanding later resulted in a real-life Mexican standoff between the sheriff and the two brothers, but after the sheriff gunned down Romaldo, Gregorio got revenge, then went on the run, took out another sheriff in the Battle of Belmont, ran again, and then was captured. Over the course of 10 days, he covered 400 miles on horseback and over 100 miles on foot, but was captured after his ironically named acquaintance, Jesus Gonzalez, sold him out to the Texas Rangers. Damn. Sorry, I digress. Ingrid would go on to tell her husband how, at the meeting at the kids' school today, she learned that Carmen and Junie have been keeping secrets from them. Carmen has been sneaking out twice a month, and Junie has been lying about having friends. And even though they do their best to hide their past lives, Ingrid thinks that somehow it's why the kids are being so secretive now. Gregorio is quick to blame Junie's problems on his obsession with a wacky TV show, but then he gets in a bit of hot water of his own whenever he fails at hiding an incoming spy message about an artificial brain. More on that later, but the following day, Carmen and Judy then go through their morning routine, which is a lot less about getting exciting stories and more about rigorous training. When Junie gets to the monkey bars, he starts to get scared, causing his hands to sweat, and that, coupled with his sister's teasing and a swift kick in the ass, causes the poor kid to fall. On their way to school, Ingrid notices Gregorio looking at a picture of a fellow agent, so he'd go on to tell her about how Agent Donegan went missing, but he didn't want to stress her about it last night. And fun fact, Donegan is played by Mike Judge, probably most famous for creating the show King of the Hill and voicing Hank Hill himself. I tell you what. But still on the way to school, Gregorio heard Junie religiously watching yet another episode of the bizarre-looking kids show Floop's Fooglies. He asks Junie why he wants to watch that weird show all day, and Junie defends that it's cool. He even drew up his own idea for one of the monstrous-looking Fooglies on the show. Carmen tries to tease him about the drawing, but he knows exactly how to get her back, and he mimics her, perfectly copying his sister's voice. Tuning back to the show, Floop introduces Dynamite, a new Foogly that was caught sneaking around the castle last night, the rascal. Something looked off about the character to Gregorio, so he studied it against the picture of the missing spy until he nearly runs over a crossing guard at school. Gregorio drops the kids off, and to bolster Junie's confidence, he tells him to remember that he's a Cortez, but sadly, he would see his son being bullied almost immediately, so Gregorio got out of the car and bumped into the bully's father. Gregorio considered throwing that jerk through a window, and he thought about all the adoration and respect that would bring him with Junie and his classmates, but he opts to keep a lower profile and goes back to his car. Sadly, Junie saw all that go down, and he's left wondering what's so special about being a Cortez. Shifting gears completely, we hop over to Floop's castle, where he was in the middle of hosting one of his investors, Mr. Lisp, who isn't too thrilled that the wacky inventor failed to deliver an army like he promised. They're understandably upset at how their $1 billion investment only got them mutated secret agents, aka the Fooglies, that only seem to be useful as novelty characters on the children's TV show, which is seemingly only supposed to be a cover for the shadowy business operation. Furthermore, the investor also doesn't seem thrilled with the bumbling robotic thumbs, aptly called Thumb Thumbs. But you can't fault them for their clumsiness because they're literally all thumbs, but Floop would then nervously fiddle with his sculpting clay that he's rarely seen without, before showing off his right-hand man, Minion's most promising invention yet. Enter the Spy Kids. Lisp is shocked whenever his own son shows up and easily kicks his butt, but Floop explains that he built a robot copy of him with all the capabilities of a super spy. But if that wasn't convincing enough, they also show off a spy kit of the president's daughter, and now Lisp is impressed. That is, until he tries to test them by asking them a spy-related question, and they mumble incoherently in response. Floop explains that they still need a brain, so Lisp freaks out about being behind schedule, and he gives Floop and Minion 2 days to finish the project. I got a few random ones for you, and I bet this first one was not on your bingo card, but in 2024, Spy Kids was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, end quote. Also in 2025, Alan Cummings, who plays Floop, told Entertainment Weekly that he took Floop's couch and that he still has it. He says whenever he sees clips of this movie online, he's always looking for his funny purple couch in the background. Lastly, in 2015, Rodriguez had an interview with Creative Screenwriting, and he said that Floop was designed to be like Willy Wonka, imaginative and childlike. Later that day, Ingrid saw Gregorio frantically moving throughout the house, and she couldn't believe what he said next. After 9 years of retirement, he's taking another assignment because Devlin, the leader of the Organization of Super Spies, or OSS, has personally asked him to investigate how 7 agents, including Donegan, have gone missing. And I love the clever editing here. Ingrid declares that she's joining her husband in saving the world, and he insists that someone is staying home for the sake of the kids, but she seductively whispers something in his ear, and the next thing we know, Uncle Felix is here to babysit Carmen and Junie. And now that the kids are taken care of, the 2 super spies eagerly step back into the dangerous world of espionage. As they speed away in their teched-out car, they call the OSS, and Agent Miss Gridenko briefs them on the details of their assignment. Following the provided coordinates, the Cortezes drive their car-turned-submarine right into the ocean, where they'd receive a threatening broadcast from Floop, claiming they have something he wants, before his massive submarine swallows their underwater car completely whole. And I don't know about y'all, but seeing a structure that big underwater would probably give me night terrors forever, but spies are built different, I guess. Back over to the kids, the day was going on like any other until everyone in the house would panic as a red alert alarm started blaring. Uncle Felix's training kicks in, so he grabs their emergency go bags and he rushes them to an escape sub while explaining that he's not really their uncle and that their parents are really spies. The kids press X to doubt, but all the technology that starts showing up makes it seem pretty undeniable. Then, sadly, some rather oblong-looking masked intruders start breaking through the house, so uncle or not, Felix stays behind and instructs the kids on how to activate the escape submarine and get to the safe house. He then orders them to find the OSS and tell them the third brain lives, whatever that means. Thanks to Junie misremembering Felix's instructions, they get off to a pretty sketchy escape, but thanks to Carmen, they get back on track. Unfortunately for our heroes, though, whoever is after them have boats of their own and they're in hot pursuit. And as we know, Junie is a bit of a klutz, so he accidentally disengages the autopilot, but again, thanks to Carmen, they escape their pursuers. However, after their maneuvering, Junie almost fell overboard, and whenever he's rescued by his sister, he accidentally re-engages the autopilot. So 2 wrongs do make a right. I knew it. The OSS is a bit of a historical homage, or Easter egg if you want to call it that. But if you didn't know, in 1942, during World War II, the US opened its very first centralized intelligence agency called the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS, which later became the CIA that we know and desperately fear today. The organization of super spies sounds way more fun. But is it just me, or did Robert Rodriguez really make me do my history homework for this movie? But, it's okay. You can just copy my answers if you change them just a little bit. And while the kids are navigating to the safe house, let's check in with Mom and Dad. Before they're taken to their cells, they empty their pockets, mostly containing spy stuff, but notably, Gregorio has Junie's custom Fugly drawing, and we'll come back to that later, I promise. But as they're escorted to the castle dungeon, they walk past Floop's Fuglies, who are alarmed to see the Cortezes, but they only speak in total gibberish. Elsewhere, Floop and Minion were overseeing things on security monitors, and while Floop was complaining about how they still need to get a brain for their spy kid robots, Minion was reassuring him that their new prisoners used to be the perfect spies, but now they have 2 weaknesses to be exploited. Checking back in with those weaknesses, the autopilot took Carmen and Junie to the unassuming beachside safe house. And when Carmen approaches the door, a robot asks for her name, and she says it, but the robot wants her full name, so reluctantly Carmen says, Carmen Elizabeth Juanita Akotskaya Brava Cortez. Dang, would you believe me if I said I nailed that my first try? Surprisingly, the door opens right up, but way more surprisingly, this space is mind-blowingly advanced to these kids who, remember, are just being thrown into the deep end of the spy world. In the safe house, the kids are treated to wonders such as self-filling pantries, Machete-branded gadgets like his Buddy Pack jetpack, emergency currencies, and I know you remember this one if you saw this movie as a kid, the mother-loving rehydrator that materializes food like McDonald's. But not even McDonald's would break Junie out of his funk, because as he stares at a wedding photo of his parents, he wonders if they'll ever see them again, and Carmen does her best to reassure him that they will. And worth mentioning, the version Ingrid tells as a bedtime story doesn't really allow time for this photo op, so I'm guessing this was either taken after their escape, or maybe she just dramatizes the bedtime story, I don't know. And speaking of the parents, they are now kicking themselves for getting caught so quickly, but escaping this trap is light work for Ingrid, so naturally, using the laser presumably embedded in every lady's wedding ring, she cuts their bindings, and soon they're exploring Floop's bizarre castle. And I do mean bizarre, because almost right away, part of the floor gives way underneath Gregorio, and he tries to make a leap of faith to get back to Ingrid, but when he does, even more of the floor gives out and he falls to his death. Or at least he would if it was a normal villain's lair, but Floop tricked them by only making it seem like there was a pit, so it was really just an optical illusion the whole time. Exploring further, they encounter a Wile E. Coyote-looking door leading to the virtual room, and this place makes no sense. It rapidly changes from an idyllic landscape to a nightmarish one, and then suddenly the pair fall through the floor and wind up in Floop's Mad Hatter-looking dinner party. Floop is actually disappointed it took the renowned spies so long to get here, but nonetheless, he's excited to eat. And we see Minion is watching them through the security system, and he's even secretly assisting his boss on what to say, sort of like a shadowy puppeteer. Things get a little heated after Carmen and Junie are brought up, but Floop's mechanical thumb-thumbs get the prisoners back in order, and then Ingrid asks their captor about the missing agents. The madman would go on to explain that the agents were part of a top-secret OSS team that was tasked with creating a synthetic intelligence from their compendium of spy knowledge. But as Floop turns to Gregorio, he says that the intelligence was destroyed in an accusational tone. Floop then exposes a secret that even Ingrid didn't know. Her husband was a part of that research team. Gregorio refuses to rebuild the brain, but Floop expected that too, so he turns on a monitor showing a live feed of Felix. Then, horrifyingly, to threaten our spies, we see Felix turn into a monstrous Fugly before Gregorio was sent away through a real trapdoor under his seat. In an interview with The Decider in 2023, Robert Rodriguez mentioned something neat about the nightmare-inducing thumb-thumbs. First, he said he created them whenever he was just 16 years old because he was trying to draw his hand, and he thought his thumb looked a little like a head, so he turned the rest of the limbs into thumbs too. Then to add a little flair, he drew the OG Thumb in a soccer uniform kicking around an eyeball and titled it Thumbs Playing Eyeball. Rodriguez said it even won an art contest. But to bring it back to the movie, he said that he tried to draw on ideas that he had during childhood because he felt those ideas were authentically made by kids for kids. Jumping back over to the human spy kids, Junie and Carmen do their obligatory montage of getting geared up to save their parents. Carmen first reads from a pocket guide aptly titled How to Be a Spy by an unknown author, but afterwards she flips through a photo album of their parents' wedding day. And the attack helicopters are a pretty good giveaway that the story about the spies who fell in love was really about their parents. When Carmen sees their dad with a man that she doesn't recognize, she decides to take that photo. Then Junie feels betrayed about them hiding all of this, but Carmen calls him out for lying about his fake friends, so Junie fires back about how she's been skipping school. I gotta say, it's starting to look like Ingrid may be right about why the kids are so secretive after all. Carmen recalls the instructions Felix gave them to find the OSS, but they were much closer than they thought because Miss Gradenko, along with a bunch of other agents, arrive and let themselves in. The kids are on high alert, but after Carmen recognizes Miss Gradenko's bracelet as the same one her mom wears, the agent explains that it's OSS standard issue, so the spy kids drop their guard. Thanks to Gregorio's final message before capture, the OSS knows that Floop was responsible, but the kids need a little convincing, so Miss Gradenko pulls up a graphic that shows how all the Fugleys were once OSS spies, and if that wasn't nightmarish enough to think about, she also plays his catchy little TV intro in reverse, and we hear that the Fugleys are really saying, "Floop is a madman, help us, save us." And I don't know about y'all, but that tune has lived rent-free in my brain for years for no reason. Not fully trusting Miss Gradenko, Carmen gives her the message from Felix that the third brain lives. Pleased, the agent gives Carmen her very own OSS bracelet, but whenever she says that she doesn't know where the brain is, Miss Gradenko's demeanor changes entirely. Around that same time, Junie was peeking outside and he spotted the same thumb-shaped masked henchman that attacked their house, so the cat is out of the bag. These are the bad guys. Also meaning that Miss Gradenko is a traitor to the OSS. Unfortunately for our heroes, however, after Carmen used the phrase, "the third brain lives" earlier, their parents' wedding photo sunk into the table and revealed a tiny mechanical brain, no doubt the very same one Floop is after. Miss Gradenko sends an agent off with a brain using a jetpack, but Carmen knows it's the only thing that can get their parents back, so while Junie is chucking millions of dollars worth of spy equipment at the goons, she leaps over a fan and awkwardly flies away using another jetpack. Junie was sorta left in the lion's den, but he was nimbly able to maneuver his way over to another jetpack and activate it like some Diddy Kong barrels. It flies unpredictably right into Miss Gradenko, lighting her hair on fire, but allowing Junie to escape into the tunnels. Elsewhere, Carmen eventually caught up to that agent with a brain and recovered it before going back to the tunnels to rescue her brother. And much like their morning training on the monkey bars, Junie loses his grip on Carmen while they're jetpacking, but this time, it's actually life or death. Like always, Carmen saves her little brother, and then to escape their pursuers, they do a GTA-style outfit swap to lose their 3-star bounty, and then they vanish by posing as a family with a couple nearby. And it has to be said, I can't do this next scene justice in my narrative format, but it's Floop in the virtual room singing a melancholy song about struggling to realize his dreams. But that song was by Danny Elfman, who you'd probably most recognize for doing the music in tons of Tim Burton movies, or perhaps The Simpsons theme song. However, towards the end of the song, Floop throws a tantrum and storms out to ask Minion in the security room about what his show is missing. Minion warns that he's too invested in the TV show cover-up, whenever he should be worried about the rapidly approaching deadline from Mr. Lisp. But they know all about what happened at the safe house and how the kids have the third brain, so to retrieve it, Minion sends a couple of familiar-looking spy kids after Carmen and Junie. And speaking of, the kids were at a park in the oxymoronic-named town of San Diablo, or Saint Devil if translated. Carmen was getting fed up with how this locator device is seemingly faulty, but whenever she looked at the back, she notices that it was made by Machete. That name rings a bell, so Carmen pulls out the wedding photo that she took of her dad and that man, and sure enough, Machete's name is there too. Soon after, Junie wants to make sure that Floop can't get the brain, so Carmen stops him from destroying their only bargaining chip. Then Junie calls her out for wearing an OSS bracelet because it could be tracking them, but annoyed at the accusation, Carmen stomps off to get a drink at the water fountain. And I'll be damned, Junie was right about it being a tracker, so she tosses it aside, but not before the robot versions of them that Minion sent out start attacking while they were split up. Carmen unfortunately knocks herself out on Robo Junie because remember, nobody wins with a headbutt. And then Robo Carmen throws Junie on a roundabout spinning approximately at the speed of light, takes the brain, and then the robots fly away. However, Junie swiped Robo Carmen's tag and the back reads Spy Kids, 1 of 500. Connecting the dots, the kids realize that Floop is about ready to have an army of those kids, and the third brain will make them unstoppable. Unstoppable. Many of the exterior shots of this movie were filmed in Chile, and at one point when we zoom into what's supposed to be a park, we can clearly see the Plaza de la Ciudadanía. Forgive my pronunciation. But according to IMDb, post-production was done at George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch, and apparently Robert Rodriguez was so enamored by what Lucas could do with high-definition digital filmmaking, Spy Kids would be the last movie that he ever shot on film. Nobody tell Christopher Nolan. Back in the dungeon with Ingrid, Gregorio would confess what he's been hiding for all these years. He was in fact on the team that created not only the third brain, but multiple brains. However, when the OSS realized how dangerous they could be in the wrong hands, they ordered all of the brains to be destroyed. But Gregorio reveals the secret that he's been hiding for years. He never did destroy the third brain, so it indeed does live. Elsewhere in the castle, Floop was fiddling with his clay while Minion was preparing a lineup of their spy kids, and something finally dawned on the entertainer. He tells his henchmen that he doesn't think the Fooglies and spy kids are working because they're really just Minion's ideas. However, Floop couldn't have picked a worse time for that revelation because Robo, Junie, and Carmen return with a third brain, and Minion reveals himself as the evil mastermind, Mr. Minion. Frankly, he doesn't need Floop anymore, so the entertainer is locked away in the virtual room. Over to the real heroes of the story. Carmen and Junie finally have a stroke of good luck because Machete's spy shop was nearby, so they take a cab and pay him a visit, assuming he's probably their dad's best man or something. Inside the store, Machete is hard at work on the world's tiniest camera, so he dismisses the kids, telling them to come back with their parents, but Carmen holds up Machete's locator device, asking for help getting to these coordinates fast. Machete is understandably puzzled, so he asks for the kids' names, and just like at the safe house, when Carmen says her full name, a door nearby unlocks. Then the kids are shocked to hear that the man in front of them is their real uncle, but he and their father have obviously had some sort of falling out in the past, so they don't speak anymore. Carmen later reads her uncle's file in the OSS database, likely with her OSS spy glasses, and she learns more about the schism in the family. While Machete may make the world's best spy gear, he sells it to the good guys and bad guys, so that's why the brothers no longer speak. That grudge must run deep, because even after Machete's niece and nephew have dropped onto his doorstep asking for his help to save their parents, Machete still declines, doubling down that he's fine being on his own. And although he may not be joining the kids on their quest, he at least does help them by letting them take his spy plane to Floop's castle tomorrow. Before bed, Carmen thanks her uncle, but he says that he's only doing so much because she's a Cortez, so she reads that as him still caring about family, but Machete denies it. Then later, when the war profiteer is deep asleep, the kids thrust awake ready to go save their parents. They basically raid their uncle's shop of gadgets, but the crafty inventor tries to keep the kids from leaving by sleeping with his map to Floop's castle. But Carmen does some slick sleight of hands and retrieves it. Then while she goes about readying their gear, Junie wants to help, so Carmen tasks him with reading the gigantic manual to the spy plane, which also has an unknown author, by the way. And I apologize if anybody can hear the rain, it's getting a little loud here, but do we have any Mythbusters fans in the house? According to IMDb, the in-universe book that Carmen reads about how to be a spy is supposedly a copy of Pocket Ref, which is a staple on that Mythbusters show. And I think it's fitting that all the spy books don't even have pseudonyms for authors because they're also likely spies themselves and they don't want to get busted either. So if you didn't know, Danny Trejo frequently collaborates with director Robert Rodriguez playing someone named after some kind of blade. In 2001, he showed up here as Machete. Then Rodriguez made a Grindhouse trailer in 2007 for a hyper-violent movie called Machete starring Danny Trejo. Then he later made it into a full movie in 2010, and it even got a sequel called Machete Kills in 2012. Both the Spy Kids movies and the Machete movies use a lot of the same cast, so there's this awesome fan theory that they're the same characters, but sadly I gotta burst that bubble. During an Ask Me Anything on Reddit 12 years ago, Rodriguez said this, and I quote, "They're alternate universes. Junie is a Cholo in Machete, Carmen is Killjoy in Machete Kills, and Machete is Uncle Machete in Spy Kids. Antonio Banderas is El Chameleon in Machete Kills, and Uncle Machete's brother and the Spy Dad in Spy Kids. Cheech is fake Uncle Felix in Spy Kids, and Machete's brother in Machete." End quote. Bright and early the following day, Machete is also thrust awake to the sounds of his spy plane activating, and he's barely in time to wave goodbye to his niece and nephew before they blast off to Floop's castle, where Minion is busy replicating the third brain for his robot army. Unsurprisingly, Junie is not an expert pilot overnight, so they run into a little bit of trouble, and thanks to their regularly scheduled bickering, they nearly crash their plane, so they have to put on their masks and eject into the ocean just before reaching the castle. Junie is then freaked out whenever they come across a bunch of sharks, but thankfully, Carmen wrote a paper on them, so she calmly leads them to an emergency exit, which they use to sneak inside. The kids are now deep behind enemy lines, but they're definitely prepared, as they demonstrate once they come across their first Thumb, and Carmen zaps it down by using Machete's electroshock gumballs. Then Junie proves to be incredibly resourceful too, by placing a bunch of the world's tiniest cameras around the main halls, allowing them to see Thumb escorting Fooglies towards them. And Junie recalls how the Fooglies speak in reverse, so he gets a pretty clever idea. Using some zipline gadgets, they hide in the ceiling so Junie can rappel down and ask Dynamite, aka Donican, where their parents are, and after playing the recorded message backwards, they learn Mom and Dad are in the dungeons. Junie tries to rappel down for another question, but he's busted by the Thum-Thumbs. He quickly retreats to Carmen for backup, and she has just the solution: Machete's electric bubbles. They easily take out the robotic Thum-Thumbs, and then they promise to return for the agents, and they carry on looking for their parents. As they navigate the labyrinth, the siblings soon find all of the Spy Kids marching in lockstep. Carmen and Junie figure they weren't too bright during their last encounter with their doppelgangers at the park, so they can probably just fall in line and sneak across the castle that way. However, they were dead wrong, and they are noticed immediately by the new and improved intelligent Spy Kids. While retreating, the kids basically cover the same ground their parents did, starting with the false floor trap. Junie walks past it before it gives way, and Carmen is brave enough to make the leap of faith. But instead of it being made of glass like with Gregorio, she actually falls into an abyss. Then the robots route Junie towards the virtual room, and without a lot of options, he just hopes it'll get him closer to his parents in the dungeon, so he goes inside. Junie finds himself in a strange, liminal sort of world in the clouds when a gigantic version of his idol, Floop, starts speaking to him. He asks Junie if he understands why he has all those warts on his hands, and Junie is fully aware his sweaty hands are because he gets scared all the time. Floop observes that Junie doesn't seem so scared now, and the kid goes off on the man that used to be his hero. He calls him out for taking his family and making the robot children, and to really drive his point home, he shows Floop how much he used to mean to him by revealing that even now, he carries an action figure of the TV host. We'll check back in with him soon, but elsewhere Ingrid and Gregorio are strapped to chairs when Mr. Minion enters the room, and I don't know why I find this so funny, but Gregorio recognizes the villain, and his name is literally Alexander Minion. But the two of them have history together. Both of them were on the Brain Project, but Minion started to act pretty sus and was fired after Gregorio reported him. But the villain gets his revenge in the most sickening way. Minion admits that he's not the most creative like Floop, so he uses Junie's drawing of a Foogly as a template and activates the cruel, monstrous machine. But the villain has no time left to waste here. He takes a call from Mr. Lisp explaining that Floop is out on business, but his army will be ready. After that call, Minion thanks Miss Gradenko for her work, meaning that these two are the ones in cahoots the whole time, not Floop. How dastardly. Terry Hatcher's character, Miss Gradenko, is a reference to the fifth song on the Police's 1983 album, Synchronicity. And I feel equal parts excited and obligated to share that fun fact with you because the name of this channel that you're watching right now is also loosely inspired by the Police. Message in a Bottle was the first track on their second album, Regatta de Blanc, released in 1979. I hope that someone gets my movie in a bottle. That's getting copyright strike, never mind. Tuning back to the kids, we'll quickly cover Carmen. She landed on a stockpile of Thum parts and she got an idea. Over to Junie. Floop got done explaining how Minion is the real villain, so our young hero decides to free the misunderstood entertainer by throwing a massive wad of electroshock gum at his head to short out the room. But before doing so, Floop desperately wants to know what his show is missing, and Junie wisely tells him, children. Then the two get on with their escape. They almost immediately run into a Thum, but Junie is so angry to get revenge for his sister, so he tackles the robot, but it turns out to be Carmen in disguise. The three of them venture to the dungeons where they'd be excited to see their mom, but then they're jump scared by a rather flat, familiar-looking Foogly that Junie instantly recognizes as his dad. And after their reunion as a family, Floop thinks that he can change Gregorio back. Meanwhile, Mr. Minion was under the impression that his evil plan was still going smoothly, so he confidently greeted Mr. Lisp and the other investors, but is immediately flustered once Floop frantically orders his henchmen to go work on the problematic robots. Not wanting to alert the gentleman on his very hostile takeover going on, he obeys the order and storms out of the room following his former boss's voice. However, whenever he tracks down the source of the voice, he doesn't find Floop. He sees Junie perfectly imitating the TV host. And too late does our villain realize that he's been led into an ambush by the restored Cortez family, who give him a taste of his own medicine by turning him into a four-headed, fugly, foogly version of himself. Floop then explains to their party that their only hope to save the day is to ensure that the Spy Kids' missions haven't been programmed yet, or else there's nothing on Earth that can stop them, so they need to get to the control room. Unfortunately, as Floop leads Carmen and Junie around the corner, Robo-Carmen and Junie flank Ingrid and Gregorio and grab them. I love the director's sense of humor when the trio makes it to the control room. They were wondering what happened to Mom and Dad, so Floop slaps a button, revealing on a monitor that they've been taken, so he says, "They've been taken." Then they wonder if they're too late to shut down the robots, so Floop slaps another button and the screen says, "Too late." So Floop turns around exclaiming, "We're too late." Carmen first asks if they can just take out the brains, but that's not feasible, so she has a brilliant idea to reprogram them. Not spending weeks from the ground up, but doing a binary switch to make them think that wrong is right. Floop thinks that is clever, but he knows it won't be that simple, but the kids rush off to save their parents, so they tell him to figure it out. The heroes run down the hall, and they're just in time to see their parents be taken away to the demonstration for Mr. Lisp, and then they're confronted by their doppelgangers again. Judy warns his sister that the robots are stronger and smarter now, but she counters that they are too. What follows is, safe to say, still a one-sided battle because the robots are still just insanely powerful, but when Carmen is pinned by Robo-Junie, real Junie has to be brave. Even while being completely outmatched, Junie faces his fear and is nearly ended by Robo-Carmen, until he drops a wrapper from an electroshock gumball and spits it right on her face. Real Carmen uses the shocking turn of events to throw Robo-Junie into the corner, then the siblings use Insta-Cement Silly String to buy them enough time to escape. They catch up with their parents, who set a great example by ordering their kids to close their eyes before absolutely thrashing all of the henchmen, trying to restrain them in just a matter of seconds. But unfortunately for the Cortezes, it's time for the demonstration, so all 500 of the Spy Kids start marching into the grand room, ready to be given their first mission of destroying the super spies. Gregorio desperately tries to come up with a plan on the fly and decides that they each have to take out like 100 Spy Kids, then they'll be okay. But Junie runs the numbers and informs his dad that there are 500 in total, so they would need one more person. Right on cue, Isidore Machete Cortez smashes through the window, ready to go down swinging with his family. And sadly, right before what definitely would have been the funniest looking fight scene of all time, Floop has a eureka moment. He then hits just a couple of keys, causing the kids to revert from absolutely obliterating the Cortezes to chaotically playing with all of the villains. And now that they aren't presently in any danger, the brothers square up with each other. Gregorio warns why he came back, and Machete declares it's for the same reason why he left. But actually, neither one of them can remember what that reason was after all these years, so Machete starts weeping and they hug it out. Let's just hope Carmen doesn't remind her dad about her uncle's war profiteering. But Junie catches up with Floop watching nearby, and he wonders what he did to save them, but Floop instead sincerely thanks Junie, explaining that he saved the day by being pure of heart and mind, which is what the inventor taught the Spy Kids to be. Ingrid and Gregorio also decide it's time to step out of the shadows, and they tell their children what the kids certainly already know at this point, but they confess to being spies. But Carmen and Junie have a confession of their own. They're also spies. But let's put a bow on things, shall we? A while passes on, and we see that Junie has indeed become more courageous after his adventure because he no longer has any problems with his sweaty hands. And as an added bonus to the adventure, the Cortezes get to enjoy the news as it covers the many heroic deeds the Spy Kids are out doing in the world right now. And Floop, of course, gets a nice ending of his own because at first in his TV show, we can see that Minion is now the one imprisoned in the virtual world. But more importantly, he took Junie's advice and added children to the show. But not just any children, he added Robo, Carmen, and Junie. But then our quaint little ending is interrupted by a call from Devlin himself offering another assignment. Respectfully, the parents tell the OSS leader that they would need to discuss coming out of retirement as a family, but Devlin awkwardly admits that he was talking to the best agents that he's ever seen, Carmen and Junie. Carmen then firmly explains that they're a family and they're sticking together from here because all that spy business is easy. Keeping a family together, that's hard, but it's the mission worth fighting for. End call. Alright, that's a wrap. I know this one was a little off the beaten path, but I'll admit, this movie was way more fun than I remembered, and I had a great time making this video. Let me know what you thought of Spy Kids, and if you can't get enough movie content, then I'll see you at the Generation Video podcast, where me, a proud millennial, and my Gen X friend take turns sharing movies with each other. It's a lot like this show, but with a lot more shenanigans and a lot less shameless plugs. But subscribe for another movie next week, and until then, y'all be good. Hey, you made it to the end. Remember, if you want to revisit any more of your favorite movies, check the links on screen, but otherwise, subscribe and I'll catch you for a new breakdown next week. Thanks.